Thanks for hanging in there with us. Eleanor Hines here again with resources on the sixth stop with John, again from the Department of Ecology. Our last technical stop on the tour is the Lignin Parcel and Laurel Street Pipe Rack. First, let's talk about the Laurel Street Pipe Rack, which is located just between the train tracks and where you might see some school buses parked on the other side of Laurel Street. There was some mercury found in the soil, as well as some groundwater contamination. Can you talk about how this area will be addressed in the cleanup?
Sure. An estimated 1,600 cubic yards of soil and a relatively localized area of groundwater have been impacted by mercury in the vicinity of the former Laurel Street pipe rack. Testing data indicate that the groundwater contamination in this area has declined a great deal since the time it was initially monitored in the mid-1990s. This area will be covered by an impermeable cap to prevent infiltration, and the groundwater will be monitored for natural attenuation.
The Lignin parcel, located on the other side of the fence looking in the opposite direction of the Laurel Street pipe rack towards Chestnut Street and Cornwall Avenue, was found to have contamination of carcinogenic PAHs in the soil and some miscellaneous metals found in groundwater in this area too. In stop 3, we already heard from the port about the work in this area. Can you talk about what the cleanup for this area is expected to look like for what still remains?
An estimated 2,500 cubic yards of soil have been impacted by PAH compounds and metals have been detected in groundwater in the vicinity of the former Lignin warehouse. It is likely that the PAHs came from old creosote-treated railroad ties in that area. Groundwater data indicate that the metals are relatively immobile. This area will also be covered by an impermeable cap to prevent infiltration, and groundwater will be monitored for natural attenuation.
We have covered a lot of ground on this tour, and I know some folks are eager to see this area cleaned up and reopened when it is safe to do so. Because the site is so complex for the cleanup, it is our understanding that there is a sequence planned where the cleanup will be broken down into 4 projects. Can you talk a bit about what this phased approach is, as well as what an expected timeline might look like?
Sure. Take a look at the agreed order amendment that is included with the documents currently out for public review. Only the schedule of deliverables section of the agreed order is being amended. Due to the complexity of some of our cleanup actions and the engineering and contracting process required to complete them, the agreed order amendment was necessary to allow the cleanup to be phased over time. This is kind of difficult to describe and probably best to look at the schedule itself. But in essence, the first pre-remedial design work will be done for the in situ soil stabilization, or ISS, field scale pilot testing, and groundwater neutralization bench scale testing. Then an engineering design report, or EDR, will be prepared for the overall cleanup action. Construction plans and specifications will be prepared for 4 phases of cleanup construction, A, B, C, and D. A being soil removal from the wastewater settling basin, soil consolidation and capping of the stormwater swale. B is the in situ neutralization of groundwater in the caustic core. C is TPH soil removal from the southeast corner of the cell building and the ISS of elemental mercury in the chlorine plant area. And D will be the site-wide capping. A strong consideration for how and why the overall cleanup action is separated into 4 different projects is the differences in the types of construction work that each will entail. For example, conducting in situ chemical stabilization of soils containing liquid mercury is quite specialized and very different from excavating and hauling less contaminated soils to a landfill. A large number of contractors can do the conventional excavation project, but only a few can do the stabilization work. By separating the different cleanup elements into different contracts, the port can select the best qualified and most cost-effective contractor to complete each discrete project and thereby achieve the best overall cleanup.
Thanks so much for explaining that piece. I know folks are certainly looking forward to the site as a whole getting cleaned up. Is there anything else that you want to add about what monitoring of the chlor-alkali site area might look like once the cleanup has started or has been completed?
Long-term compliance monitoring is a critical component of the overall cleanup action. Ecology needs to know that the cleanup action worked and continues to work. A compliance monitoring plan will be prepared, and the long-term compliance monitoring will consist of Ecology reviewing the metrics identified in that plan every 5 years. For example, we will be looking at the groundwater data to ensure that monitored natural attenuation is working. We will be reviewing the effectiveness of the institutional controls, and an environmental covenant will be recorded for the property. If something is not working as it should be, Ecology will step in and require that it be addressed.
John, is there anything else that you would like to add about the cleanup for this particular area that would be helpful or interesting for folks to know?
I would just encourage people to read the cleanup action plan and look at the agreed order amendment. Although somewhat technical, these documents are not that complicated or difficult to understand. The reader should walk away with a pretty good understanding of what this cleanup will consist of and feel confident that all of the state's cleanup standards are being met.
Thanks so much for joining us today, John. We really appreciate you, John, for sharing your knowledge with us. By now, you, our tour visitors, have learned more about this complex site and might be wondering how you can have your voice heard in this public process. So be sure to stay tuned for the final stop on this tour to learn more from Ian Valley at the Department of Ecology on how you can participate in this public process.